Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I've not done a talk in quite a while, so I apologize if I'm a bit rusty. Thanks to Carol for reaching out and the rest for the organizers for making this happen. It looks like you've got quite a community here, which is pretty amazing. I wish Cornwall was so busy. We do have Cornwall Geeks meetup in theory once a month, but I don't think there's been any on for about 2 years now. But the Slack is still pretty active, so that's all right. My name is Natalia. I'm an environmentalist by night and a web developer by day. I'm a front-end developer at the Developer Society, where we work with nonprofits, NGOs, and groups with a progressive mission to help make the world a better place. I'm also a first-year environmental science student. I'm hoping to combine my knowledge of technology and the living world to advocate for climate change. I also volunteer for Climate Action Tech, which is a global community of tech professionals with skills, expertise, and platforms to support solutions for the climate crisis from the tech side. If I'm not coding or trying to save the world, probably exploring, rock climbing, or trying to outlift everyone in the gym. Or what happens majority of the time, I'm just spoiling my dog Dobby, who is likely to make an appearance today because he's very needy and he likes to be involved in every meeting I attend. So why am I here today? For some time now, I've been trying to figure out what I can do to battle climate change. I've made a lot of changes in my personal life. I make sure that I use green energy providers. I eat vegan, locally grown fruit and veg. Minimize my contribution to fast fashion, consumerism, that I vote for green-centered policies, sign petitions. And all of that is great, but at the end of the day, we do need big organizational changes. We need green policies, we need governments and organizations around the globe to do their part, because systematic change is the way forward. So today I'm going to talk to you about some ideas that pretty much anyone can do, things you can take with you to implement in your workplaces. A couple of years ago, I had this epiphany that I surely am affecting the environment through the work that I do and the technologies that I use. At the time, I haven't heard of many people talk about technology and climate change. So, as you do, I went on Twitter and I asked for help. And that's how I've learned about OMG Climate. OMG Climate is an conference. It was taking place in London. I went to the event. I learned so much during it. I left it feeling so inspired and hyped, and I kind of felt obligated that I need to take all this with me, learn more about technology and climate change, and spread the awareness of the importance of it. By all means, I am not an expert. I've not written a book. I haven't run any campaigns. I'm just here with you to share what I've learned. So hopefully that will inspire you to make some of those changes so that the tech industry could become more sustainable and greener. Technology is pioneering in new inventions. It showcases how brilliant the human mind is. I think this industry has potential to fight environmental injustice, but it is up to us to do it. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about climate change. I will show you some current stats and overview where we are with the climate crisis. I'm going to show you the ways of how we can reduce carbon footprint through the work that we do and within our workplaces. And at the end of it, I'm going to show you a few examples of work that's already happening in the space. So I'm going to share some stats about climate change with you now. According to the UN, we only have 10 years to prevent irreversible damage from climate change. And what it means is that if we don't act now and the global temperature rises by 1.5 degrees Celsius, it will result in more dangerous disruptions to global societies and ecosystem, and that's including longer and hotter heat waves and more frequent crop-killing droughts. Well, scratch that. As you know, IPCC report has came out just the other day. That information that we only have 10 years is from 2009 report, which is just 2 years ago. And according to the latest report on climate change, we're on the tipping point. Just to give you a few points of what that report concludes is that global temperature, global surface temperature was over 1 degree Celsius higher in the decade between 2011 and 2020 than between 1850 and 900. The past 5 years have been the hottest on record since 1850. The recent rate of sea level rise has nearly tripled compared to 1901 and 1971. And if human influence is very likely, 90% of chances, is the main driver of the global retreat of glaciers since 1990s and the decrease in Arctic sea levels. It is visually certain that hot extremes, including heat waves, have become more frequent and more intense since 1950s, while cold events have become less frequent and less severe. On top of that, you've probably heard that the internet is responsible for 2% of global carbon emissions. And putting that in perspective, it's the same amount as the emissions from the aviation sector. Don't take this fact to, it's a bit exaggerated because those emissions, the aviation emissions don't actually include embedded carbon, but it's a huge eye-opener that the IT industry does emit a huge amount of carbon emissions. By 2030, the IT industry is on track to be responsible to consume as much as 20%, which is a fifth of global electricity supply. 60% of the wildlife has been lost since 1970. We're on course to lose over half of all insects by the end of the century. I don't know if you've actually noticed, but 10 years driving on the motorway 10 years ago compared to now, how much less insects end up on the windscreen when you're driving. You know, that's really happening, and we're not at the end of the century yet. And what was mentioned earlier with the report is also that Greenland has set new record for ice loss, and that's 532 billion tons of ice loss. Music streaming accounted for 200 to 350 million kilograms of greenhouse emissions in 2015 and 16 only. So if you were to listen to an album 27 times by streaming it in full, it is very likely that manufacturing and producing the same album would be more environmentally friendly than actually streaming it. I've done some calculations on listening to Spotify and doing it for 8 hours a day for 21 working days. So, you know, as we do, we sign in with work, we put music on. The emissions from that would be nearly as much as driving nearly 20 miles by an average passenger vehicle, which is pretty crazy. Mobile phones contribute to 3 million metric tons of e-waste each year, which is less than 16%, of which less than 16% is correctly recycled. Data centers are extremely carbon intensive. Most of them are still powered by the good old fossil fuels. They consume 3% of global electricity supply and account for 2% of total greenhouse gas emissions. When I tweet those slides later on, I'm also going to tweet an open letter to AWS services where we're basically asking for their data centers to be greener, because at this moment in time, I believe only 2 of them in Europe are running on renewables, which is not that great. There is a study focusing on Japan, and in this study, it's suggested that Japan's data centers would consume its entire electric supply by 2030 if the growth continues at today's rate. So what can we do? Sorry. I believe that the first step of making fundamental changes is starting a conversation. Get your team together at work and talk about the importance of climate crisis and why it is important for your organization to join in and start making changes. As much as the whole team should be involved in the conversation, I believe that assigning one person as a, I don't know, sustainability chief, sustainability officer, however you want to call it, I think that that should take place so that this person could keep everyone accountable, could organize everything. We did the same thing when the GDPR legislation came out, and that worked. So doing that with the with making our organizations more sustainable will work as well. If you have ability to do it, calculate your organization's carbon footprint and set goal for minimizing it. The B Corp website has got a pretty good tool, assessment tool. I would highly recommend checking that out and going through the process. Create an internal policy. Write down a solid policy for organization. This is the most important step. So you're not just having another meeting, but taking this seriously, and so that everyone actually hops on board. Some of the things that you can include in this policy, as well as you can implement in the company within the organization, is make sure that you are reducing waste by recycling and composting. It's quite a silly thing to say, but a lot of offices produce a lot of waste. You can set up a really small composting bin in a kitchen and use an app called Share Waste. Using this app, you can basically say that you've got an amount of waste that you'd like to compost, if anyone's got any composting, if anyone's doing any composting, and the other way around. It's a great app. I use it. It's a great idea as well. When organizing meetings, opt in for plant-based catering. People don't like when I say that, but it's very important. Opt in for low carbon travel options to events and meetings. Avoid flying and choose trains where possible. They are more expensive, obviously, than driving or flying, but you can listen to podcasts, watch Netflix, or do some extra work. Get your team on board with 8 principles of green software engineering and build carbon efficient applications. These 8 principles form a shared understanding of what it means to be green software engineer, independent of application domain, industry, organization size or type, cloud vendor or self-hosted, programming language or framework. And these principles ask you to build applications that are carbon efficient, applications that are energy efficient, that consume electricity with the lowest carbon intensity, the applications that are built that are hardware efficient, maximize the energy efficiency, reduce the amount of data and distance it must travel across the network, and build this carbon-aware applications and focus on step-by-step optimization that increases the overall carbon efficiency. sorry, I realized that I've gone through it really quickly, but I'm going to post the slides so you can go through it again. I'll also post a link to all the resources that you can have a look at. Build simple, accessible, performant products. The more resilient the more resilient web we build, the longer it's going to last, and the need for phone and laptop upgrades is going to decrease, which is going to lead to less need for consumerism. We don't need brand new phones or iPhones as soon as they arrive, and nor do our clients. Build fully accessible sites, optimize images and scripts. Check how your site is impacting the planet by running performance tests using Lighthouse, for example, and calculate your website's carbon footprint using website carbon calculator. Offer green hosting. I think this is actually the most important thing you can do is to offer green hosting by default. You can add it to contract with your clients. If they question the pricing, don't be afraid to explain why it is important. Green services are a little bit more expensive, but not that much. But the benefits of doing it, is much better. You can find green hosting providers on the Green Web Foundation website. Other than creating an internal policy, I would recommend organizing 11 at 11. 11 at 11 is an initiative that encourages people to spend 11 minutes every Friday at 11 o'clock to talk about current state of the environment and climate change. And most importantly, be vocal. So to summarize it, start a conversation, find sustainability officer, calculate your company's carbon footprint, create internal policy, minimize waste, opt in for low carbon travel options, plant-based meetings, follow green software engineering principles, build resilient web, offer green hosting, participate in 11 at 11, and be vocal. Excuse me. Other than that, I would recommend joining organizations and volunteering groups such as the Climate Action Tech, and participate in campaigns that promote green web, like the Let's Green Web Together one. We're in the middle of climate crisis. We need individuals and organizations to talk about it. We need to be vocal, and your company, the organization you work for, can be a part of it as well. It's extremely overwhelming, especially reading, reports like the one that came out just the other day. I find it extremely anxiety-inducing, and whenever I read news like that, I feel so hopeless, and I feel like, I can't really do anything. But at the end of the day, if we start a conversation, if we talk about it, if we implement those little systematic changes within the organizations, then, little by little, we can make big changes. So how can we save the world one techie at a time? We can do it by being brave, by creating systematic changes within our workplaces, by having conversations about climate change with our colleagues, and by implementing green policies and following green development practices. So that is me. I hope you've learned something during this talk. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.